Hello, today is June 30th, 2021. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard. You're watching The Pipeline. Joining me today, as usual, is Western Standard news editor Dave Naylor. Dave, I hate England.
All I can say, Derek, is England.
You guys cheated. That clearly should have been a red card for that tackle at the beginning. Could have been very different.
Could have been if your guy on a breakaway could only hit the net.
That's not unfair. That's not unfair.
But factually accurate.
Well, yeah, I suppose. That's why you're the news guy.
There you go.
Also joining us, as usual again, is Corey Morgan, Alberta political columnist and host of the Corey Morgan Show. How you doing, Corey?
Very good. Thanks.
Do you care about any of this football stuff?
Not in the slightest.
I didn't think so. You have to be very cultured to like European things.
Yes, I'm as lowbrow as they get.
We want to start by thanking our Western Standard members for their support. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandardonline.com/membership. Try it free for 15 days. And then let's I suppose we should probably mention our sponsors. Today's show is sponsored by the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. Nobody works as hard as the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights for your right to own and use firearms. Check out what the CCFR is doing by going to firearmsrights.ca and clicking Why Join Us. That's firearmsrights.ca. Click Why Join Us to find out what they're doing and how you can get involved. Today's show is also supported by Resistance Coffee. If you're all sick of Lululemon style companies, X% of the proceeds go to fight for the latest woke cause. Well, Resistance Coffee is a great antidote to that. You can by buying with Resistance Coffee, a portion of the profits go towards supporting causes supporting your constitutional freedom. So go to resistancecoffee.com and use promotion code Western Standard. That's one word, Western Standard, to get 10% off your first order. Again, resistancecoffee.com. Use promo code Western Standard. Get some discounted coffee. I know you like that stuff, don't you?
Yeah, no, it's been great stuff.
What was your favorite blend?
Just by the title, The Liberal Tears, of course. I mean, I just can't help but love thinking of slurping up Liberal Tears in the morning. But the Defund the CBC, I think flavor-wise, was the best of the bunch.
I think they should have like a Bitter Truth. That would be that's a good flavor.
Yeah,
right?
They've got Black Gold for their dark roast, but no Bitter Truth yet.
Bitter Truth,
maybe they'll come up with one.
I think so. Okay. Well, we're going to jump into the show here. There's been a series of church burnings across Canada. I think all in the West, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if they've all been Catholic, but at least predominantly Catholic churches that have been burning. Dave, why don't you fill our listeners in on what's been happening with this and why? What? Give us kind of the lay of the land and what's happened.
Sure, it's a very troubling story, Derek. Total of 7 churches have been set on fire in Alberta and British Columbia. 4 of them in British Columbia and 3 of them in Alberta. The fire started just days after it was announced the discovery of the mass graves in residential schools in Saskatchewan and British Columbia. Days after that, there were two churches burned in the Okanagan, and another one burned the very next day. Then the troubles spread to Alberta. There were 2 fires set on consecutive days this week on the Siksika Reserve, one a Catholic church, one an Anglican church. And just this morning, a century-old, historic, beautiful Catholic church in Morinville, north of Edmonton, went up in flames. And there's video of that terrible fire on our website, Western Standard Online. It really is sad to see. So the politicians have been mainly quiet on it. It has been pointed out that anytime there was damage to a mosque or a synagogue, politicians are quick to jump out on it. Mainly they've been quiet on this. I can't explain it. I don't know if I don't think it's an organized group of terrorists. Is it just people using these Catholic churches as a scapegoat? Is it actual Indigenous First Nations people themselves that are burning them down? Most of the fires have happened on reserve land, Derek.
The Morinville one, though, I think that was in the town.
The
right?
Morinville one was in the town, and that a lot of the fires have reduced these churches to ash. The ones in Siksika escaped massive damage, but the attempt was there. So obviously, a lot of anger being directed at the Catholic Church. They ran the 2 residential schools in question in Saskatchewan and British Columbia and Kamloops. We learned this morning of another 182 graves found at a residential school in Cranbrook. So that's just breaking news as we speak. So
I didn't even hear of that one.
I know. I'm filling you in. So it's to me, I find it troubling anytime there's obviously some sort of, organized or not, a campaign to burn down Catholic churches in the country, and it's very, very troubling.
Well, we've got some interesting reactions coming in. Probably the most interesting is Ben Dillon that says nuke the Vatican. I'm not sure I quite share that sentiment.
No, and Indigenous groups have today set up a meeting with the Pope. The Pope still hasn't apologized for the Catholics' role in the residential school system. And keep in mind, it wasn't just the Catholics. Several religions. It was a government-run organization back then, a government-run idea, and then the churches stepped in and ran what the government wanted them to do.
Yeah.
So it's not just Catholics, but they are bearing the brunt of it at the moment because the graves are being found at their schools.
M. Dragmont, I think, is misunderstanding what Dave said. He says, "Why on earth would you attempt to blame Indigenous groups for burning mosques?" No one blamed Indigenous groups for burning mosques.
No.
I think what Dave was saying was that when a mosque is attacked, or a synagogue is attacked, or any religious institution that's essentially not a church is attacked, there's rightful condemnation from politicians and public figures. We rightfully make a big deal of these things.
As there should be in this case.
But for some reason, they're silent here. I'm not aware, maybe it's happened at some point. I'm not aware of any Indigenous person who's ever been linked to a crime for burning a mosque. No one said that. No one implied that.
No.
But there is a reason that the politicians aren't speaking up on this one. I mean, for one, it's super heated, and there are a lot of angry, hurt people. Things are coming up that to be honest, we've always kind of known about, but we just didn't like talking about. And it's in our face now, and we have to address it. But what the politicians don't like talking about is the churches were just the contractors. This was all under the mandate of the government. I mean, if the government didn't want these residential schools operating, they'd say we aren't going to operate them. The churches were the ones basically hired to run these things. And it's not saying the churches are free of any blame on these things, but the government, I think, is more than happy to see all of the vitriol and anger go towards these churches rather than themselves. Because we got to remember, the head of the Canadian government right now's father has spent his entire time in politics while residential schools were running. There's a lot of blame and fingers to go around, but to condone violence, and that's what this is, arson. It's dangerous. I mean, I remember in Calgary with the Forest Lawn Hotel got burned down. It killed a firefighter. Like, this can't be tolerated, no matter how angry people are, no matter what they may think, or what the past church entities did. This has to be stopped. This is not the way to deal with it at all. And they got to take it seriously, and politicians have got to speak up on this one too.
Well, and I think the people, I suspect, not based on anything but my own gut feeling, I suspect it's angry young men. And young men do very stupid things. Old men do stupid things too. Young men are much more prone to do
impulsive.
And out of anger. So it's a combination of rightful anger. I think there's a right to be angry about these discoveries, although we don't know half the story yet. But at the very least, we know that something terrible has happened here. And there's a right to be angry, but also young guys. It's also a thrill. Like, they're doing they're doing something dangerous.
You're bringing up actually a sense of purpose. If you felt you found a cause, I mean, there's a number of reasons, and it'll be person by person. I don't think it's an organized group, as you said.
No.
These are individuals. I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, this is pure speculation. If one or two of these turns out to be actually non-Indigenous social justice warriors who feel that they're going to make the mark on the world. I mean, when we get these investigations, it'll be interesting to see who is behind it. I just hope it stops before somebody gets very seriously hurt, though.
Yeah.
And these churches, a lot of them, as much as people don't like it, are cultural centers for there's a lot of Indigenous converts. And I know some people talk, well, that's because they were forced to back with residential schools. Well, that's a longer discussion, but they are a part of those churches. Those churches are a part of the community, and you're harming them when you burn these things down.
Well, no, I've spent a fair bit of time, at least on the Siksika Reserve. The church that at least was attempted to be burned down is an important and historical part of the community. I mean, even if you don't go to church, these are historical buildings. They're a part of our history. I mean, after destroying people, the next greatest crime is destroying history, destroying architecture. There's not old things in our goods. In the grand scheme of things, we're a very new place. We've only been settling here for a bit over 100 years. So but what's also happening here is I think that, I mean, Canadians are having this great reckoning where, I mean, some people are on the self-flagellation tour where it's, how terrible am I, even though I had nothing to do with this. But I think more reasonable people are still reflecting on the scale of what happened, the need to get more information about what happened, genuine introspection. I think by going out and burning churches, they're destroying a lot of the necessary sympathy for this conversation that people are having. I mean, I'm not a Catholic, but I'm still pretty pissed off by people burning Catholic churches. I'm not an Anglican, but I don't like people burning Anglican churches. I don't like this kind of thing is going to erode sympathy when this is a unique moment where, at least for a brief period of time before we go back into our tribes, start hitting each other again, where people are able to come together and discuss this issue as common human beings without our regular political tribes. This is just going to split people apart again, and it's going to allow people to point and say, look, these are not reasonable people. They're committing acts of violence and destruction. I don't think it's going to help the cause and the conversation that Canadians need to have.
No, it's distracting from what is. Again, we're seeing these conversations coming up and a lot of examination. And now, we're looking at these burnings and other incidents going on. It's just, it adds nothing, absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it's very sad. Well, anyone who's been outside or in your house without air conditioning in the last week has known it is hot as hell across the West. We don't normally do a weather report on the Western Standard. We don't have a weatherman. But I guess, Dave, you'll be weatherman today. Massive heat wave across the West, but in particular hitting British Columbia on the West Coast, the hardest. 233 deaths so far that have at least been attributed one way or another to the heat wave. Why don't you tell us what's happened with it and the controversy that this has now created with the BC government and John Horgan?
It's a staggering death toll, Derek. I mean, if you think it's a good-sized plane going down with 233 people on it, and these poor people, for the most part, died alone and in their own homes. These are people, dozens in Vancouver proper, dozens in Surrey, dozens in Burnaby, all across the Lower Mainland that have passed away due to the extreme heat. Police forces are stretched thin. There's a 45-minute wait to get through on 911. There's sometimes a 2-hour wait if you call for an ambulance. Imagine calling 911 and then waiting 2 hours. So it really is a terrible, terrible situation, particularly in BC. The town of Lytton has, for the last 3 days, has broken Canadian temperature records. Yesterday, 49 something Celsius, believe it or not. That's not just for comparison. That's the hottest day, it's hotter than the hottest day ever recorded in Las Vegas. That's how hot it is. It's absolutely unprecedented. And with all this carnage, for lack of a better word, going on, Premier John Horgan came out yesterday and said, well, fatalities are part of life. And if you couldn't put your foot in your mouth any further if you tried. It didn't take long for the social media to erupt in outrage, and a few hours later came the predictable apology from Horgan saying, every life is precious and whatnot. Police are urging people, go and check on your neighbor. If you have an elderly neighbor and you haven't heard from them in a day or two, go and knock on their door, make sure they're okay. Hotels in Vancouver there's a huge no vacancy sign. Every hotel is filled with people desperate just to get air conditioning. So it really is a terrible, terrible situation, the likes of which has never been faced in Canada before with these temperatures.
I mean, we're not talking about the weather just to pass the time. It's a significant event.
Oh,
I mean, it's hot here. Do we have any known deaths in Alberta from the heat wave we've had?
Not to my knowledge.
It's been very hot, but it's not been like.
And there's no humidity.
That is one of the great things I like about Alberta summers.
These deaths are difficult to attribute. It depends on your system too, because it's a contributing factor to somebody who was already in ill health. Though it could certainly be the final.
I know of a health issue that's like that.
Yes,
a lot of
definitely impacting. I would find it hard to believe that there would be at least a number of Albertans who unfortunately succumb, whether it was a heart condition or other things, because they're dealing with this heat when they typically wouldn't have.
I know there's been a few incidents. There was a man drowned yesterday in Osoyoos, paddling with his child, and was pulled under the water. There was an 11-year-old girl pulled out of Lake Mahogany in Calgary. Several river rescues. So people are doing whatever they can to cool off. It's groundwater, and water is dangerous.
I'm not going to call those heat wave deaths, but I suppose they would be tangentially
related. Yeah.
It's more related to a heat wave than some deaths were connected to COVID. So
they wouldn't be in the water if it wasn't this hot.
So, Corey, does this mean that British Columbia needs a heat lockdown? They need to force people to shelter in place with air conditioning on pain of jail?
Yeah, I mean, if this, for the zero risk cult, and that's what it's becoming, and the ones who feel that the state can save us from anything, had this been something that's predictable and we could see it coming and in time, I think, I wouldn't think for a second they'd hesitate to step on, civil rights and things like that. They'd say businesses with air conditioning must be forced to bring in people to sit within it. And if you've got a garden hose and somebody walks by and you don't spray them, you're going to get a ticket. It sounds ridiculous, but this is where we're at.
Well, instead of masks, we can have those little air conditioner, little fans that you can strap to your head.
Yeah, I mean, because of the unpredictability of the beginning and the ending of this, the statists haven't been able to do that. But it's not beyond belief by any measure. So either way, I'm just hoping that we get measures in and things to. When this passes and the most people can shelter somewhere safely and cool down, because it really is very dangerous for a lot of people, and it's quite serious. I'm worried about the fire hazard too. Like the bush is tinder dry right now, and I
was just out on the weekend, and in central west Alberta, kind of towards the Drain Valley area, and the fire risk, at least on the signs I was going by in these provincial parks, said extremely low. I don't know how long that's going to stay that way, though. When you've got temperatures like this, my kiddie pool, I filled up before 2 days ago. By the end of yesterday, I had about an inch of water left in the bottom of it.
My house backs into the bush, just out of town there, and I could tell you the spruce forest behind my place is dry. I mean, you grab those twigs and needles and they just snap. So I imagine it's indicative of the rest of the eastern slope right now.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's it for the weather report. We'll get... But, I think an important one nonetheless.
Can't ignore it. It's basically a natural disaster almost in the Vancouver
area. Canceling Canada Day. This has been, I don't know of any country that does this, where I think there was, Jen Gerson on the line had an interesting point on her column this morning. She said, in the United States, they've just created another holiday, Emancipation Day. And it's a day that recognizes the darkest chapter probably in American history. But also, Emancipation Day is recognizing the end of that and the spirit of liberty that drove the end of slavery in the United States. They didn't cancel Independence Day to cancel something great, recognizing the independence and birth of their nation as a state. they created another day to recognize it. And we've just gone through Indigenous Day, and I think that's a day that I think rightfully could be used to reflect on things like residential. I guess we're kind of coming back to our first topic with burning churches here. But it was to, they have a day for reflecting on that kind of, for lack of a better term, original sin of America. But the drive is now to cancel Canada Day. Certain cities in provinces across Canada have, to one degree or another, announced they're canceling Canada Day. But it's certainly picked up some steam. I guess we're just days away from it here. Dave, why don't you tell us where the Cancel Canada Day movement's at?
Well, it's still growing and still happening all across the country. Big cities like Victoria, smaller municipalities like Penticton, they've all canceled their Canada Day celebrations. Basically, in respect, after the news of these mass grave sites at the residential schools. City of Edmonton maybe is taking it a step further. Mayor Don Iveson yesterday encouraged everybody to wear orange on Canada Day to reflect on the role and the fate of Indigenous people in Canada and what happened to them. One councillor up there said, "No, hang on a minute." Councillor John
Zhadek.
It
It's a very difficult,
is.
I think, Ukrainian name. I always have trouble with that one.
That's why I deferred to you. He says, "Not so fast, Mayor Iveson." He's going to proudly wear red and white, celebrating Canada's multiculturalism. He says, "Let's pick another day to celebrate or commemorate Indigenous people in the country." So we're the only country probably that I can think of that the founding day, the day that everybody gets together and has a party and a backyard barbecue, is causing division. Only in Canada, but it's still strongly felt, and I'm sure probably there'll be more Canada Day cancellations in the few hours left before the party starts.
It's Canada Day tomorrow?
It is.
Holy crap. Well, yeah, you see how much time I have booked off.
Yes. I won't be in the office, by the way, tomorrow.
Oh. Well, thanks for letting me know.
No worries.
Corey, this attack on Canada Day, I mean, destroying statues of Sir John A. Macdonald, if I didn't know better, I would think that this movement is trying to delegitimize the state or nation. I don't know, Canada's maybe not really a nation, but it's a state, trying to delegitimize the moral foundation of the Canadian state. If I didn't know, but what do you think they're trying to achieve? Because every nation has myths.
The angry people, on the ground that we talked about, even the ones that go to the extremes of burning churches or desecrating statues or things like that, that's one group. But it's these self-flagellating, virtue-signaling idiots that we have in office that are feeding it with this crap like canceling Canada Day. Naheed Nenshi, our blessed mayor in Calgary, was going on about that the other day, regretfully almost saying we're going to have some fireworks. But otherwise, people should not celebrate, but take it as a moment of reflection. Kiss my ass, Nenshi. Of all people, because let's talk about it. You got 364 other days to reflect on what Canada's done wrong. Let's do one day to reflect on what Canada's done right, which is a lot. And Naheed Nenshi, of all people, his parents came from, I believe, Northern Africa. They took that chance. They came all the way over here. They raised a son who actually raised up to become the mayor of one of the largest cities in Canada, respected across the nation. That's telling me this is a damn good country. This is a place with a future for people, with opportunity for people. As much as they're always saying we're this land of racism, Nenshi, you'd be working in a Walmart if we were as racist as you imply we are. You're the mayor of bloody Calgary. So no, we're going to celebrate it for one day. And yeah, I support Alberta independence. I'm sick of the way Confederation is. I do not like the contract. I don't like the Constitution. But it's a part of our history, and this nation in many ways has done well by me, and for one day I'll observe that. And I'm just tired of these politicians trying to make their point by crapping on Canada Day.
Nathan Gita had an interesting column on this topic, contemplating, this delegitimization of Canada has got to have should the Western independence movement or the Alberta independence movement be latching onto it? Because, I mean, there is virtually no good economic reason or political reason for Alberta to remain in Canada. The overwhelming reason Albertans continue to remain in Canada is an emotional attachment. And what is an emotional attachment to a country other than a set of myths and stories and symbols that we share and tell each other? Flags, founding heroes, wars, institutions, virtues that we're supposed to share. And if we're essentially all just a bunch of genocidal settler murderers, then clearly Canada's not a legitimate
There's no
state.
cohesion. I guess we're just a bunch of nasty people, so we might as well just tear it down and rebuild anyways.
And so he had an interesting point on that, and I agree with the position he took that that's not the foundation to build a new country. Is just to, because as terrible as Canada is as a federation in terms of how it treats certain parts of it, it's still a great country in the greater scheme of things. It has been on the right side of history more often than it's been on the wrong side. It is a tolerant place more often than it's not tolerant. Just these people demand perfection in an artificial world with artificial humans as they see fit. And as very flawed as Canada is, I think we should keep our criticisms of Canada to what is fair, what is factual, what is reasonable, and not side with those, I think, taking cheap shots at a country that doesn't deserve to be dragged through the mud unreasonably. That doesn't mean we can't, reflect reasonably, be introspective about the things that have gone wrong, and absolutely, Canada has its blemishes, more so than most of us were raised to believe. But I just don't think we should be hitching our wagon to people who have so little respect for their own history.
We don't want to change the national anthem to "Whoa, Canada."
No.
Whoa.
Corey's right. Come on, let's celebrate for one day. We've had a long 18 months. The end is sort of near. Don't forget, tomorrow all the COVID restrictions go down in BC and Alberta, except Calgary, of course. Except Calgary.
Well,
You're Calgarians. You're still got to wear your masks, but everywhere else, we're free to go. We're free to assemble. We're free to have 7 people, maybe even 8 if you've got 8 friends sitting with you at the pub. There's a lot of reasons to celebrate out west on Canada Day. So let's go and enjoy it.
Well, since my beloved Germany is out of Euro Cup, I'm going to change the flag back at my house, back to Alberta.
You do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you all for following along with us. Again, we want to thank all of our Western Standard members for your generous continued support. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, you should be supporting bailout-free media owned and operated for Westerners. Go to westernstandardonline.com/membership, and you can try a trial for free for 15 days. Today's show was sponsored by Resistance Coffee. Again, Resistance Coffee is producing some great stuff. Portion of their proceeds go towards supporting liberty and constitutional causes. You can get 10% off of your first order by going to resistancecoffee.com and using promo code Western Standard, one word Western Standard as your promo code to get 10% off your first order at Resistance Coffee. As well, today's show was also sponsored by the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, also known as Dave's Face Tattoo. The Coalition for Firearms Rights works very hard to protect your natural right to own and use firearms. They do absolutely fantastic work. Check out what the CCFR is doing for you by going to firearmsrights.ca and clicking Why Join Us. You can learn more about what they do and how you can join their fight to protect your right to own and use firearms in Canada. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a slice, and happy Dominion Day.
Happy Canada Day, everyone.